Greg Dan just asked me now, like, don't we do those jazz Fosse hands right now? I'm up for that. I'm up for that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Samara Michelson, and I am the Worship Associate today. You are welcome here, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, and no matter your background, you are welcome here. No matter what your spiritual and or political journey is, you are welcome here. I didn't tell him anything I'm going to say today, so I'm going to look for his reaction a couple of times. You are welcome to join us as a community to learn, live, and love together. All are welcome as we worship in a way that gives us each meaning and value. No matter what you call this building, this hour, or this gathering of people, we worship as one complex, multifaceted body, illuminated by the light of the chalice. With those words of wisdom, now please remember to turn off your phones. Airplane mode is really good. It is good that we gather together today, and we will now have the prelude. empty chair next to you, could you put a hand up high? Because a few more people have just walked in. If you all want to come in, there are quite a few empty chairs.
Leave your hands up.
Leave your hands up. Good idea. Looks like they're single. Sorry to break you up.
We might need more chairs.
Two thoughts I was having just now is that we're thinking everyone has a seat. Thank you. There probably is a chance to really like chill and settle in, but then maybe Jim's full of surprises today too. And I also like to fill in people. If you've never been here before or never seen this symbol before, this comes from the deaf community, American Sign Language. It is the way of applauding. You are welcome to applaud in whatever way you want, but that's what this comes from. It's not just Bob Fosse moves. So as we delve into the subject of the second principle today, which is equity, justice, and compassion in human relations, we really don't know where Rev Dan is going to go with this. But it's pretty likely to be really interesting. And since my whole life is about movement and warming up, I thought we needed to have a little warm-up to go into this subject. But it's a thinking warm-up. I invite you to think about the word compassion, which is a word that really fascinates me because it literally, from Latin, means to suffer together. Were you already going to tell them that?
Well, not anymore.
So, emotion researchers define it as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. So let me say that again. The feeling that arises when you are confronted with another suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. That is in our brains. We are born with that capacity. We also can make the choice and really work on enhancing this capacity and enhancing our activation for doing compassionate action. So right now, this morning is a really good time to open your mind and open your heart as we explore how to deepen our compassion for each other and for all that we encounter. And today's music is really geared to helping us all come in to resonance with each other. So I allow you to go deep into our community resonance.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dan Lambert, and I serve this congregation as minister. It is great to be here with you today. Thank you for gathering in this sacred space. As we light the chalice this morning, we're reminded that it's a ritual that unites Unitarian and Universalists everywhere and calls us together here in this space where we gather in sacred community. The flame of the chalice is a symbol of so many of our values, including truth, knowledge, love, courage, sacrifice, passion, and the light of being together in community. Please join me in reciting the affirmation, which is printed in the order of service as we light the chalice, signifying our sacred gathering this morning. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our aspiration, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you so much. Well, it is truly wonderful to gather together here and to see that we're almost totally out of chairs and space for people to come and sit. I would just remind you who are here regularly, as you come in, if you wouldn't mind coming to the front. The front row is really not a bad place to be, is it? Front row people? And to move in and to fill in the gap so that couples or families who come in can have a place to sit if they come in just a couple minutes late. So thank you for doing that. And of course, that also means we may be having some parking issues. So I remind you that we do have the ability to park at the library. We've got some parking spaces on this side of the building. which is a little bit more challenging to access. But let's think about what we can do as we continue to grow and pack the house, which is a wonderful problem to have. If you are a visitor with us this morning, we are so glad to have you. And we would love to give you an opportunity to stand and introduce yourself if you'd like to. We'd like to know who you are. If you don't mind sharing your name, where you're from, and why you decided to visit us today, we would really appreciate that so that we can put a name together with a face and then make sure you feel welcome to be greeted throughout the morning. Is there anyone who would like to say hello to us this morning? Over here. We've got a microphone coming so that we can all hear you nice and loudly, please.
Hold it close.
Good morning. My name is Edward Carroll, and this is my wife Nancy. And we're visiting Nancy's brother and his wife here who live here in Punta Gorda. We're from Brevard, North Carolina, near Asheville. We're members of the Transylvania County UU Church. And so we're happy to be here and happy to have an opportunity to visit with y'all and be here for your service. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's so great to have you. Other visitors that would like to say hello?
My name is Lynn Silvis. I'm visiting from the Villages, Florida. I'm visiting my lifelong friend, Kate Hamill. And I'm very happy to, we were actually raised in the Catholic faith, but I'm very happy to be here and learn about, tell me again, Unitarian. Unitarian Church of.
It's only 47 syllables. So. Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Charlotte County, Inc.
Thanks. She's very happy in your church here, and I'm happy for her.
Wonderful. We've got up here in the front.
Good morning. My name is Herb Waters. I'm here because my wife asked me to come.
All right.
And my friend Nancy. I don't know where she is, but hi Nancy. Welcome. I came with a friend. I used to be a member of the Philo Cafe, and many years ago, and I met a woman who used to come here, and she introduced me to the principals, and I don't know what happened over the years. I just drifted away. So I do agree with the principals, and I'm here to because I'm a free thinker. Thank you.
Excellent. You're super welcome here. Very glad to have you.
Hello, everybody. I don't know if you all know me. My name is Corey. I'm not really a visitor. I'm a member, but I've kind of felt led to speak. I've been working with Mary Jane. I've done and recorded a cover of John Lennon's Imagine, and I filmed the music video this past week right here in the sanctuary. And I don't know if I'll be able to show it because I don't see any kind of projections. But when I saw it in the order of service, I feel very compelled to join the choir today and sing it. If that's all right with everybody. If you don't mind, I would like to come up with when we sing it with Jim. I do have one question. Are we skipping the first verse?
No, that was my mistake.
Oh, okay, because that's the whole verse gone. I know that's all my life.
Holding my back.
Time's on the way here. So when I saw it in the order of service, I got really excited. And, you know, I've been working on this for about a month now. So I apologize if my thing's not top notch. I don't have my order too. So.
Thank you, Corey. Got a couple more hands up here.
We have a guest here. We have a guest here, our friend Rosa from Nicaragua. Thank you for joining us.
Hugh, you had your hand up? Did you want to say something?
No.
Oh, you were just, okay, wait. I never know if this is an auction or what's going on. We have another hand here on the left.
I'm Amy. I was born and raised actually in Arcadia. We've been here in Charlotte County for about 10 years. This is my adopted daughter, Jocelyn, and my son, Connie. We're trying to find at home.
You've come to the right place. I hope that you'll find that this is warm and welcoming for all of you, so thank you for being here. It's great to have so many visitors, and after the service, we have a social hour where we have some snacks and some coffee, water, whatever you'd like to drink. We ask those of you who are visitors to stick around and just get to know us a little bit. It's a great way to find out more about who we are and what's going on. It's a great way for us to get to know you. So please, when the service is done, please don't run out too quickly, but hang around for a little bit. And if you didn't do this on your way in, there's a welcome table, and we ask that you stop and just give us a little bit of information so that we can hound you for the rest of your life with junk mail. Just a couple other notes that I'd like to share as we get going this morning. Last week's service, I got so much good feedback on it, and it's humbling, and I really am honored by that. And thank you for everything that you've shared verbally, through emails, text, and so many other ways. And people have been asking, how do I share this video, or how can I watch it if I missed it? We do have a YouTube channel, and so if we go to the internet and you go to youtube.com, and in the search box on YouTube, if you just type in UUFCC, it'll bring up our YouTube channel, and that's where you can find the video from last week. So I've been uploading videos since I started in October, and we have like 8 views or 11 views. I think the most was 12 views. We have over 200 views already from last week's service. And I know that it's mostly from you folks sharing it with friends and relatives, and a lot of people watching it who aren't part of our fellowship, which is a really great way to spread the word about who we are and what we do, and so please continue to do that. And if you're attracted to be a part of our group and you want to learn more about who we are, on occasion we have something called a Who Are You class, and this is a way for you to learn about Unitarian Universalism, our values, our history, this congregation. Whether you might want to be a member or not, it's a great way for you to learn about us. And so we're going to have another one of those on Sunday, February 9th at noon here in the sanctuary. So we invite you to come and be a part of that. Lynn, do we have a sign-up sheet for that? Where did Lynn go? Is she outside, probably talking to visitors? There may or may not be a sign-up sheet on that bulletin board, so it doesn't really matter if you sign up. Just show up. Also, maybe you noticed on your chair when you came in, there's an interest survey. And we would just like to know what kinds of things you might be interested in doing, what kind of talents or gifts or abilities you'd like to share, or maybe committees or teams you'd like to serve on. So if you would please just fill that out sometime this morning, and then maybe leave it on your sheet, or we'll figure out a way to collect those. And we're going to do that over the next couple weeks. Yes, Debbie?
The caring committee and hospitality is on here, and
It's
also
not?
patient advocacy. So-
Well, I'm going to talk to the person who put this together and just make sure that that person gets.
I just thought I would.
All right,
mention
so
that.
if you're interested in doing the Care and Hospitality Committee and Patient Advocacy, you can write that in at the bottom. Yes, Stephanie?
And also for the endowment committee, it is a separate entity from the fellowship. So it isn't something that you necessarily volunteer for, it's something that you participated in through donations. And then you get considered or asked to be a member of the trustees.
All right.
So it's a separate entity.
All right, good. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So as you can tell, we have so much going on. This is a super, super active fellowship, and it's really great to be a part of that. And so we're going to do a couple of different things this morning just to see how they go, because remember, we do awkward. So we're going to do a song called If I Had a Hammer, which is a perfect song when we talk about justice, and you guys might know that fairly well. So I brought my guitar with me today. This is a no judgment zone, remember. We've got a few folks in the choir that have some percussion that they're going to share. And so we invite you to sing along and have some fun. What we're going to do at the end for the fourth verse, we're going to sing that once, and then we'll repeat that, and then we'll do the little tag at the end a couple times and end and see how we do. All right?
Ed, they have a.
Oh, that's not. Oh, that's a different song.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that'll be down the road when we do that. So we invite you to stand and join us either in body or in spirit as we sing this morning.
Favorite song.
I didn't bring my amp this morning because I'm thinking we don't really need an amp. It's not that big of a space. I really should have had an amp. Well, thank you for that. That was so much fun. Each week at this time, we take a few moments to read from what we call the Book of Life. This special book allows you to share something of importance with the fellowship. Each Sunday before the service begins, you may write your own joys or sorrows, large or small, to be read from the Book of Life during the service. The book is on the table just inside the door as you enter the sanctuary. In our tradition, we revere the living of our lives as a sacred endeavor, believing that the joys and sorrows we experience hallow the living of our days. And now for the entries for today. On this day, I commemorate the birthdays of Stephen Hawking and Isaac Newton. Stephen was born on January 8, 1942, and Isaac was born on January 4, 1643. Isaac is famous for his laws of motion, and Stephen for his ideas and theories about cosmology. Both are giants in the field of science and have contributed significantly to our understanding of the universe. Many thanks to these individuals whose birthdays we honor this month. And that's from Joseph Fenty. Thank you, Joseph. A sad note from Kay Azar. This is a sad day in the Azar home. Mona's pet pooch, Max, passed away on Friday, which we know is a super difficult thing. So certainly our sympathy to the family for that. At this time, we invite you all to come and participate with us as we have a moment of silence. And then we invite you to come up. We have a table here on my right and your left with some stones and a bowl with water. We invite you to come and take a stone as a symbol of the things in your life that you would like to release or maybe to celebrate. They can be joys or sorrows. They can be silent. They can be something that others know. But after a moment of silence, we invite you to come up, take a stone, pause for a moment, and simply drop it in the bowl with water as a way to release it into the universe. So let's have a moment of silence at this time. this time we're going to sing another song that most of you are probably pretty familiar with, Imagine. Corey mentioned the fact that the first verse isn't there. That's because I forgot it. I don't know how I left it out, but it was totally 100% my fault. So we're going to start with the first verse, which, if you remember, goes, imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. Imagine no hell below us, above us only sky, da-da-da. Right? All right. So, let's sing.
So one of the weekly jobs of the worship associates, and there's about 8 of us who take turns doing this, is to say something really inspiring for getting you to put money in the baskets. So this is what I decided to do. Rev Dan had the Abundance Essential Oil in his room, in his office. And in my really profound, oh, it smells great. Woo! And so in my really profound, insightful words, I say, be generous with your money today. Give what you can, and give any amount that makes you feel good. And know that you are a part of everything that happens here, whether you have money to give or not. And if you are a first-time visitor, just with the baskets, don't feel like you have to put anything in them. You are our guests today. So if the ushers would come up.
kinds of new things. Now, this is really important. I don't think if you have friends at other UU congregations, you should tell them how much fun we have here. They would be so jealous. So, where's our visitors from North Carolina? All right. So last week we started a series on our 7 principles. Each week we're going to take a deep dive to look at one of them and to talk about what they mean to us and how we are to live them out. Last week we looked at our first principle. And today we're going to really... Somebody whispered at me, compassion. Today we'll take a look at our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Now notice that I brought out the projector. I've got a couple of slides that we'll share here in a few moments. So we're doing all kinds of fun things with music and technology and just trying to enjoy the space and bring some energy and bring our time together to maybe a different level. So I want to start by sharing some news items that maybe if you read the news, if you watch different news outlets, or if you look at it on the internet, maybe you've seen some of these really frustrating and exasperating, egregious acts that put our most vulnerable citizens at risk. This is a news item that comes from one of my colleges I attended, Ball State University in Indiana. We know from other news stories that waiting for a friend at Starbucks, working out at the gym, moving into a new apartment, playing video games with a granddaughter, eating lunch, waiting out in public, some of these mundane acts, if you're black, can lead to arrest or even death. And now there's another incident this past week that we can add to that list, sitting in class. When Sultan Benson, a senior at Ball State University in Indiana, who was black, arrived at his Marketing 310 class on Tuesday of this past week, his usual seat was taken. His professor suggested that he move to an empty seat toward the back, which he did. About half an hour into class, another student left, and the professor asked Benson to move up. Benson had already had his textbooks out, his laptop taking notes, he had plugged it into charge, and he simply requested that he be able to stay where he is. The professor was agitated, called the police because Benson was being disruptive. The police did in fact show up in class trying to sort things out. We know that being black or wearing the fashion of your religion can lead you to having the cops called for no reason, getting arrested, or even being shot and killed. Another item. For decades, the Violence Against Women Act, that was an issue that could transcend partisan politics, even in Washington on Capitol Hill, but not anymore. The landmark legislation, first passed in 1994 to protect victims of domestic violence, funded programs like rape crisis centers, shelters, and legal services to victims of domestic abuse. But after several unsuccessful attempts to reauthorize legislation, it lapsed amid partisan snipping in Washington, and advocates warn that critical programs will be in jeopardy if it's not renewed. We know that men in power want to protect themselves and their powerful friends from legal action stemming from how they treat women. In our own backyard, we have a few items. From yesterday's Sun newspaper, Christine Marfit thought she was unfairly charged $250 for being late with her homeowners association fee several years ago. She fought that fee and lost. She wouldn't quit and ended up representing herself in circuit court proceedings because she couldn't afford a lawyer and couldn't find one to help her. Now, Marfit is losing her home to foreclosure for $36,299 in attorney fees and fines that she owes to the homeowners association. There is no legal aid in Charlotte County to help her. We know that those who live paycheck to paycheck are punished by our systems for not being wealthy enough to afford lawyers, not being able to afford doctors, decent housing, good schools, or even reliable transportation. The punishment for being poor is more punishment. A Florida Supreme Court decision this past week involving the death penalty has thrown around 150 death penalty cases into legal limbo, experts say. On Thursday, the court said it erred in 2016 when it ruled a jury must be unanimous in deciding a defendant convicted of murder should be sentenced to death. Now lawyers and anti-death penalty advocates are scrambling to determine what this means for existing cases that are in resentencing phase. No one knows how broadly the court will attempt to apply it, and there are serious constitutional issues for all cases for which relief is being taken away. Since the 2016 ruling, dozens of death row inmates who had been sentenced to die with non-unanimous jury decisions were granted new sentence hearings. There are at least 147 people waiting to see if their sentences will be changed from life in prison to death because of this ruling in Florida. We know that our criminal justice system is anything but just. It's anything but just, especially for those who are poor and for minorities. The International Olympic Committee declared this past week that athletes are not permitted to make any political or social statements at the upcoming Summer Olympic Games. The powerful try to create the rules for when and how marginalized get to protest their marginalization. Remember the kneeling during the national anthem in the NFL. A couple of more local stories. Our own U.S. Representative Greg Steube pointed, of course, to cases around the country where he believes transgender athletes are dominating females in sports, which is a false narrative, by the way. He unveiled what he calls the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act last week. The freshman congressman insisted the bill will ensure that women and girls are allowed a fair playing field in competitive sports by prohibiting use of Title IX funds to support women's sports in which transgendered athletes are allowed to participate against women. Steube's bill would require that sex for the purpose of sports be determined by the athlete's sex as assigned by a physician at birth. Not to be outdone by Steube, our very local state senator who represents us in Tallahassee is a co-sponsor of 3 bills introduced in Tallahassee last week that would, 1, ban gender-affirming health care for transgender children. 2, repeal municipal and county ordinances that protect LGBTQ workers. And the third one legalizes so-called gay conversion therapy in places where it had been previously banned and medically debunked. These are our local representatives, folks.
They need to see the movie Boy Erased.
That wouldn't make a difference because they don't care. Homophobia and transphobia continue to be codified in our laws. This past Friday, Tess and I had an opportunity finally to see the movie Just Mercy. And I know many of you have seen it. I've had several of you say that you've watched it, and some of you have posted on Facebook about it. It is a very well done and interesting movie that highlights the inequity and injustice in our legal system. At least 11% of people convicted and sentenced to death in death rows all around America are later found to be innocent or to have serious problems with their convictions. The movie clearly shows that some progress is being made, but there's obviously so much more to do. And of course, as an aside, the movie made the state of Alabama look even worse and more racist than it already seems to take pride in doing around the nation every single day. The makers of the movie Just Mercy want us to think that our court system is broken against people of color, against the poor, and even against the truth. The fact is that our legal system, our healthcare system, our education system, our financial institutions, and on and on and on, are not broken at all. Not a single one. They're working exactly the way white men designed them to work. They're not broken. They're flawed, but they're not broken. They're working exactly the way they were designed from the founding of our nation, even before 250 years ago. All of these systems were created All the rules were written so that rich, white, Christian men could accumulate more wealth and more power, and to make sure that others couldn't. Our founding fathers were not the benevolent, wise, nearly omniscient men that our whitewashed history books want us to believe. If you read actual academic histories of our founding fathers, you'll see that there was plenty of argument, plenty of disagreement about how to create this nation, about the Constitution, which took years and years and years to negotiate, about how to create the criminal system, the court system, the financial system, so that it would accomplish its purpose of rewarding rich, landowning white men and making sure that all others had a hard time climbing that ladder. Justice is not blind. For those with money and power who can afford lawyers, it's almost always about having persuasive lawyers. It is not about the truth in most cases. It is not about the truth. These systems are not broken. They are rigged to favor those already in power. And as we've seen for over 300 years, those in power will not easily, willingly, or quickly surrender that power. Just think about the actions that had to be fought for, and in many cases are still being fought for. First of all, those who were white, male, non-landowners had to fight for their rights to have their voices heard. We know that women fought for decades and decades to get the right to vote and to have other rights that were not easily given to them. Obviously, we know some of the history of slavery and how long it took to eradicate that evil from our land, but we're still living with the repercussions and many of the consequences of that. Black voting rights, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, criminal justice reform, tax reform, immigration reform, rape kit funding for sexual harassment laws, healthcare reform, on and on and on and on we could go. So what does all of this have to do with our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations? See if I can get the technology to work. Yeah. Take a look at this well-known graphic. Some of you maybe have seen it go around the internet. It's been around for a very long time. Over here on the left panel, this is an example of equality. We've got three people who are trying to watch a baseball game, but they're by the outfield fence. And so in order to see the game, somebody says, well, let's treat them all equally and give them something to stand on. So these three people, even though they're different heights, have the exact same thing to stand on. This is equality. It is not the same thing as equity, and it is not the same thing as justice. Equity and justice requires that we do something to make sure these three folks have a chance to see the game that they want to see. So the shortest one, or the most vertically challenged, as some of you might prefer to say, gets a higher stand. This person gets one that works. This person doesn't need a stand, doesn't need a hand up, doesn't need help. They can see over the fence on their own. I think this graphic is fantastic for helping us understand the difference between equality, which we all say we want, and equity and justice, which I hope is what we really want. Part of what I want to do today is make sure that we understand the difference. Equity is the state of being equal, especially in rights, opportunities, and laws. We often call it fairness. You know, when we're kids, or you may have kids or grandkids of your own, nieces or nephews, whenever they're playing a game, they like to say, hey, no fair, whenever they feel like they're being cheated or something doesn't work out the way they want it to. Hey, no fair. Okay, but we're treating equally. If you have multiple children, how often have you heard them complain? The younger one says you're treating the older ones better. The older one says the younger ones get away with things I never got away with. Blah, 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 blah. Treating everyone the same is not equity, and it is not justice. That is not the goal. I often hear people say, and I've heard some of you say it, that, you know, I was raised to be colorblind. I don't see if someone's white or black or brown or yellow. I don't see if someone is gay or straight or transgendered or is poor or rich. That is privilege.
Amen.
If you have that attitude, if you believe that is your goal in life, that is your privilege talking. It's one thing to say, I don't want to treat people differently. I want to treat people all with love and compassion. That's totally fine. That's a great goal. But that is not where our society is. We have to see differences in color. We have to see differences in socioeconomic level. We have to see differences in sexuality and in gender identity so that we can help those to whom are not being treated in an equitable way. So that we can use our privilege to make a difference in society, in laws, in culture, and all of those systems that were set up to make people fail and to hold them down, to be able to succeed, to have a chance at a decent life, and to feel like they belong. What is justice? Does it mean equal justice? Does it mean equal rights? Is Lady Liberty blind to differences? We know that roughly 6% of our population in America are black males. About 38% of the inmates in our prisons are black males. Does that sound fair or equitable to you? I have a lot of family members who say, well, it's because black men commit more crimes than white men do. They don't abide by our laws. If they would just do what the cops tell them, they wouldn't be in jail. Bullshit. There's story after story after story after story after story of innocent black people being harassed, being arrested, being shot, being killed. What was it, 2 months ago when we had the grandmother shot and killed in her bedroom in her own home after midnight because a cop was scared? That's not justice. That's not equity. That is not a society that we want to live in. Who's going to change it, though? Do you think those 38% black guys in jail are going to be able to change that? Hell no. We have to participate in changing that. Why? Because we are the ones with privilege. We are the ones with the voice that those in power are at least somewhat willing to listen to. We are the ones who need to get out the vote to make sure we are electing representatives and senators and presidents who can represent those who need the help the most, those who are marginalized, to elect those with compassion rather than a hunger and a thirst for power. This quote is something maybe you've seen a lot. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Who famously said this?
Martin Luther King.
Okay, now that's attributed to Martin Luther King Jr., but he actually stole that from a Unitarian minister. Theodore Parker, who wrote that in an 1853 sermon. The arc of the moral universe is long, meaning that moral justice doesn't happen quickly. It takes years and years, decades and decades, generations and generations, centuries and centuries to change things so that justice is more prevalent in our society. But is that really true? Does the arc of the moral universe really bend towards justice? If it does, it doesn't happen naturally, and it doesn't happen passively. It only bends towards justice if people like you and people like me, people with privilege, people who have power, people who have authority, people who have a voice, make it bend towards justice. It does not happen automatically or on its own. It takes a hell of a lot of work to bring justice into any society, to help any marginalized people group come into the mainstream, to give them a chance to survive, to fight day by day by day for what they should rightly have simply because they're humans. Our role in compassion, equity, and justice is influenced by the fact that we call ourselves Unitarian Universalists. And we say that we value the inherent worth and dignity of each and every person. We say that we value compassion, equity, and justice. This is why we fight. This is why we side with love. This is why we demonstrate. This is why we march. This is why we write petitions and write letters and make phone calls and stand up when we have an opportunity to, whether or not people in power like it. And in this election year of 2020, I challenge all of us to do more than we've ever done before. Because your IRAs aren't at risk. Your retirement funds are just fine. It's your neighbors who are at risk. It's the children in the school systems who are going to lose lunch funding because of Trump administration rollbacks. It's our environment that is at risk because of rollbacks and regulations. It is the people that we love and care about. Those who live on the fringes, those who do not have voice to speak out for themselves, they're at risk. As whites, we have an obligation. As males, we have an obligation. As relatively wealthy people, and if you are sitting here today, relative to most of the United States and absolutely most of the world, you are a wealthy person, whether you feel like it or not. As humans who care, we have an obligation to fight for justice. Justice requires us to understand that equity often isn't enough, and that some people need what the majority often see as an unfair advantage, at least for a while. Equity drives us to want to level the playing field for everyone. Compassion helps us to realize that life isn't fair for many, and helps us to motivate ourselves to do something about it. As UUs, our liberal religion motivates us to be compassionate towards those in challenging situations, towards those who are marginalized, discriminated against, and kept down because of the rigged systems that are everywhere in our society. It requires us and motivates us to fight for equity at all legal, political, and social systems. And it motivates and requires us to work for justice alongside of and behalf of all those victimized by power structures designed to keep them down. This work is not fun, it is not easy, it is not quick, it can be dangerous, is often messy, and may require the sacrifice of relationships with people that you love dearly. But for those of us with privilege, this is what defines our Unitarian Universalist faith. Amen. Amen. Next week, we'll take a look at our third principle, which is the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, and hopefully I won't yell. Yeah, well, I'm not going to promise anything, because being sick and out for 3 weeks, I've got some things pent up. Gave me a lot of time to think. Let's stand, if you're willing and able, and let's sing in body or spirit, number 169, We Shall Overcome. And honestly, I always feel a little bit guilty as a white man with all kinds of privilege singing this song. And so I sing it on behalf of those for whom we fight. And so if this is something that you always are challenged with, I encourage you to think about those who are marginalized, that our demonstrations and our work can help. Number 169, We Shall Overcome. We invite you to rise in body and or spirit as we sing.
shine.